Thank you for inviting me and thank you for that nice introduction. It's always, I'm a bit all over the place. So like I'm calling myself an artist now, which is not entirely like, I think it doesn't really, it's the best fitting label, but there is still problems with that label. I chose that label at some point because it was the easiest to just call it art and then I can do anything and I don't need to justify it anymore. So it's more like a trick. But I started to study actually informatics. I was always very interested in the technical side of things, but also the philosophical side. So it was a bit difficult for me to choose now in the talk, like what am I going to focus on? Am I going to show works that have a philosophical connection to what's happening now with AI, or is it more, am I going to talk about works where that more became a tool for me? Because every new work I make has a completely different approach to things, but they all have some common ideas behind it, of course, because they all come from my brain or in collaboration with others. I also work with other artists or other people that have problems defining what they actually are. I'm going to start with a work that I did together with Benjamin Maus and Richard Willemer, two friends of mine. We studied together back then visual communication. And there we were experimenting a lot with technology. And the work is called Public Face. And it's a monument for the first algorithm. I don't know if it was the first, because the first is quite often wrong if something is supposed to be the first, but it was an early algorithm that was able to read emotions out of faces, which was of course, back then it was not called AI, it was more, I think, what term did they use back then? Machine learning, or was that even, I don't know, 15 years ago. Yeah, but it was definitely something trained on a lot of human faces, and it was made by Fraunhofer Institute, and it was published, and I thought, wow, okay, now human emotions become readable by machines. And I thought, okay, this might be a turning point, but it's always difficult to find a turning point because it's such a slow process with so many different aspects. So where do you put the monument? And monuments always have that problem, right? Like if you want to build a monument, you have to oversimplify something because you will never get it right. You cannot make a monument for something very complex. But I thought this moment where a machine can read an emotion is something special that, for me, felt a bit different than anything I saw before. And we were invited back then to do something in Lindau. So this is a like 15-year-old making of video. So back then, don't take the editing serious. It's just like what I have now from this. Yeah, so we thought about building a monument, and in the end, a smiley face, of course, is a very simple way of displaying emotions. Back then, emoticons were actually not such a big thing yet. It was more like text messages, and like there was no emoticons yet. And so this model was able to read specific emotions on different scales. So it could say how happy you are, how sad you are, how surprised you are, and how angry you are. So we try to map those onto this mechanical smiley sculpture, which could rotate the axis of the mouth and the two eyelids. And you can display quite complex emotions with that, because each has 255 states. And then you can mix those with each other. So we were actually surprised how well that worked, even though it's only 3 axes. But of course, 3 axes can have that have each 255 positions can display quite complex things. And Yeah, lucky we were invited to do something in Lindau, which has a lighthouse, and we put it on top of a lighthouse, which I think is a great pedestal for a monument for the ability of machines to read human emotions. Yeah, and then it was there. Maybe there's some technical images of how the process actually works. Yeah, here we have it. So there's a very long lens in the lighthouse. We saw it like the eye of Sauron, like in the Lord of the Rings. So we want the eye actually to be in the lighthouse. So we need that very long lens. And then it's randomly taking photos and picking people. And yeah, we were invited to show this again and again and again in different cities. Last one was last year in Saudi Arabia. And we always kind of slightly changed a little bit the way we collect data, because most laws forbid it after that to just install a camera in public space. Even though there's tons of cameras in public space, it is almost every time impossible to actually do it. So we had to get faces of feeds of other cameras. Like what we did now in Riyadh is we programmed a Snapchat bot that would download every uploaded images of the whole region and scan those photos, which was surprisingly easy. And then we would actually get tons of images of people that are posting it right now in that region. So probably the emotion data is more real than if you would have just put a camera somewhere where you can only see very few people. That's always difficult. Like the idea is to kind of have the average emotion of people as part of the skyline. So you can always look up and see, is it just you feeling shitty, or is everyone feeling shitty, or like, or only you feeling good, which is possible now. But and also like back then we were super critical about this. We were afraid of it, like being used by police, being used by governments to control the masses or understand the masses and know exactly where to kind of send the cops or like I was scared because normally you would need a policeman in order to look at a person and then like say, oh, that person is angry or nervous, and then but if that becomes a machine that can do that, this is much easier to scale up. And now we are deep into this time where this is happening, and it didn't seem to be the most relevant effect of it. But back then I was worried, but I was not afraid. Like I always sort of say it's good to work with new technology and let's understand it. Let's experiment with it. That was my approach back then. So this was supposed to also be a monument to not scare people, but make people aware of what these new abilities of technology could have as a meaning, or so they can build their own opinion on it. And it was quite interesting because this smiley sculpture has such a like silly, positive look that most cities thought, oh, it's just something positive, and they wanted it as like a sculpture for their like celebrating the city or something. So we were invited to quite a lot of cities installing it. They were not that aware that it's critical, and sometimes it got cancelled because later they found out that it's actually against the rights of people to be scanned. And then there was a scandal, but that was exactly what we wanted. So we had it like on a city hall in Sweden, and then it had to be removed again because it was against the law. But we were actually invited by the city, and so in each town where we exhibited it, it created different problems but in the end we always reached the goal of making people more aware of what these abilities of technology actually could have for an effect. So this was a very, very, very early work, and then I want to switch to work that are more connected to the title of my talk, which is Grenzen der Intelligenzen, which doesn't translate that well to English, with boundaries of intelligences. And here I'm not talking about like artificial intelligences or human ones. I'm talking about all of them. And trying to figure out where are these boundaries. And normally it's very difficult to understand your own boundary. It's always easy to point at others, right? So you can look at an animal and you can see, okay, that animal is able to perceive certain things and not able to perceive others, or to do certain steps in abstraction, like with birds or like with these typical intelligence tests for animals. You can see how much steps of abstraction they can do, or how much tools they would use in order to get something. And I always imagined some other species that is doing those tests with us. And what is our boundary, or where's our end of perception? And specifically, the perception of space is something that I work with a lot. And this becomes now more relevant again with us tinkering with artificial intelligences, where this might actually have an effect. So we might be able to translate something we are not able to perceive yet through artificial intelligences into a language that we can understand. But who knows? I'm not sure about that. But this is something I was always experimenting with. Here it's called egocentric system, which is inspired by the shift from a idea of the universe where the Earth is the center of everything, to a later heliocentric system where we thought, okay, the sun might be the center, to now something that nobody knows where the center is. And we don't even know how many dimensions the space we are in, or if it's curved in one or another way, or if it is actually curved. So if it actually has a center or not, that's up to debate. And so I was turning around myself for long enough to that I was not perceiving it as emotion anymore. You can get used to it, and then what you perceive is that you are standing still and the world turns around you, which makes you the center of everything, which is, of course, a very interesting feeling to have, and it shows you how easy it is to completely change your system of reference into something that is something only you perceive and everyone else perceives something different. So how easy it is to exit the common sense of reality and make your own sense. And then I'm, okay, what common sense do we all as humans have that is also completely off? And we would, how is it possible ever to leave that bubble? You know, like, probably not, but maybe it is. Maybe there's something that we don't understand yet, which we might understand at some point. And so one example is the fourth spatial dimension. This is the work I did with Benjamin Mouse again, the same guy I worked on the Smiley. This is a commission for CERN, the Nuclear Research Facility. And maybe some of you saw tesseracts or four cubes, or however you want to call it, in some screen-based, like little animation of mathematical or geometric body. Basically, a tesseract is just a higher dimensional cube. So if you have a line, it has one dimension, a square has two dimensions, a cube has three dimensions, a tesseract has four dimensions. It just goes on. It could go on forever like that, but we cannot perceive or imagine more than three dimensions, which is one of these boundaries of our ability to imagine something. People quite often say these words like, okay, the human imagination is limitless. It's not. It's very limited. and it's just impossible to perceive that limit, so we think it's limitless. And so this is a monument for this limit. Again, I like monuments, and I like making us aware of what we cannot. And yeah, it was very interesting to make that thing, because you would bump into that limit all the time. And no matter if it's the mechanical parts or if it's programming, it drives you crazy. But that's exactly what I liked. And I think it's maybe even more interesting for us making it than for the audience seeing it. But yeah, I really like these works where you really deeply go into these states where you get a bit lost. Same with the rotating platform. It was me testing it as an example, and people were looking at me, which worked quite well. A lot of people said that they got sick watching me, which is also the ability that humans have. If you look at something, you imagine you are that. So this worked pretty well. With the Tesseract, I don't know how possible it is for a viewer to actually grasp that disability to imagine it. How do you make someone aware of someone's disability? I don't know. What I'm planning on doing is working further in this direction of the disability to imagine more than 3 spatial dimensions. And I thought it could be interesting to actually train models in 4-dimensional virtual space and have that combined with a language model so it can translate things learned in 4-dimensional space into language, which sounds pretty abstract, but could be interesting, because what we have so far is just like quite small. Like the only way we can imagine 4-dimensional space is by imagining the difference between 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional space, and then say, okay, what would if that happened in one next step? But we cannot really think that. And but with a model that you train in a virtual space, you can decide how many dimensions that space should have. And you could train a helicopter pilot that would fly in 4-dimensional space, no problem. But it's a question, how do you translate it? And that might be something interesting. So the next work I want to show is actually from my newest exhibition called Grenzen der Intelligenzen, which is very much inspired by our contemporary idea of what an AI might become, and also about, yeah, generally, like, maybe I show the video first and then I talk about it more. Is the sound hearable? Yeah. Should I put it up here or down here? Like up? Yeah, it's on maximum. It's a very long video, so I skip through it very fast. That's how it ends. Yeah, these are termites in Kenya, and when there's the first big rain in the year, they would fly out and try to find a new place to settle. And if there's any electrical artificial light on the way, they get trapped by it. Like a lot of insects get trapped at night. Because how to navigate is they would always keep the strongest light source in the same angle. And so that would mean they would fly straight, if that would be the moon or the sun or the sky, because it's kind of almost infinite far away, so it will always stay in the same angle if you go straight, which of course is not the case with artificial light. That's the reason why you find so many insects at artificial light sources at night, because the animals start to spiral around it. And then a slight defect in the navigation would mean that they would at some point end up in the center of it, which in this case means the death of a couple of thousand termites, which is a problem in their spatial perception, which works well in a world without artificial lights, but it does not work in a world with artificial lights. But they have quite a fast perception. That's why I shot this film in slow motion. And you saw the blinking of the lights because they flicker in 50 hertz, which we are not able to see because our perception is too slow. And so in reality, these lights were actually flickering, and that's what they see because they need to have a quite fast perception for their way of flying. And so they see this strobe effect, which we cannot see. So this is, again, one of our boundaries, because perception and intelligence is quite close to each other. I think it cannot be really, you cannot really separate it. And so we are very slow when it comes to this. So while we look at the termites dying because of their limit of perception, we see our own limit of perception. And I hooked up the lighting in the gallery to the computer, so the whole light in the gallery is flickering in the same frequency, slowed down, so we can actually see it flickering as these are also flickering and we don't see it. So I just slowed that down, matching the speed of the video. That was one part of the exhibition. The other part of the exhibition is called OSB. OSB is this wood, which is like normally the cheapest wood you can get in a hardware store, and I think it's used all over the northern hemisphere. In the south, it's quite often more the sheet metal that kind of replaces that material, depending if you're in a country with more wood or not. And this material always inspired me, so I chose to make images with it, because for me it always looks a bit like chopped up world, which is pressed together to something new. And I like this as a metaphor for our media. And so what I'm displaying in it here is based on trying to combine ancient stories or narratives that we know from fables, but also a lot of religious narratives of Adam and Eve, or the Judgment Day, and combining that with contemporary thoughts about what's happening right now, and hope for the AI to save us, or being afraid of the AI to take control and might do something that we don't like. And it's quite difficult to actually implement, like to make visual stories that contain AI as something, because there's no good image of it. Like what would you use to symbolize AI? So I chose here the octopus as the most alien intelligence we know, because it has a very different wired brain, and on the right side the owl as an ancient symbol of intelligence, and I'm mixing it all up. So I'm combining different stories here. The whole format of the image, the altar, is inspired by Judgment Day images where in some future, some higher intelligence will judge us, which you can read in quite a lot of articles right now being written about AI. So I thought, okay, is this actually a self-fulfilling prophecy because we are so used to that Christian narrative? Or is that something that is just automatically happening anyway in our cultures, that this is this narrative, or this being afraid of some higher being that might judge us? On the other hand, it's both. It's like being afraid of it, but also hoping for it. Right? There's also these people that say, okay, the world is going to end because we broke everything. Our industrialized society, like, is not. It will end the life how it's enjoyable. So we're actually hoping for some higher being to save us, right? So it's these two, and like in each of the panels, I would show different aspects of this. Is a solar eclipse that is underwater. It's a bit difficult to show the details on the screen. So I'm using real animals and plants, and I put everything together, and then I put it in an industrial press with like hundreds of tons of pressure, and then it becomes this material. So it's actually material that you can use afterwards. And so you can make these OSB wood not just with wood chips, you can also put whatever in. You can put food in, garbage, and it all becomes quite a strong material. You can see a little frog here too. It's a bit hard to see here. That's a hurricane and a swarm of birds and an evil octopus. So the octopus is just an octopus I got from the fish shop and pressed with these high pressures and temperature. Works quite well. You can make octopus OSB. And also, yeah, I used some, I don't know which one, I think this is Dolly, to imagine the images before I would compose them. The frog. That's a hurricane image.
But it's very
Yeah, and there you can see it in the exhibition, so it's also blinking. Yeah, the clips I made with pizza and spaghetti. It worked pretty well to use the spaghetti for the magnetic field lines. And so this whole board is composed of food. I think the final image was here. Yeah. So this is also about how things transform from a being to an image of itself. So you take a fish or an octopus, which is still, you can still kind of feel the aura of the being, and then you put it through that process, and it transforms into something two-dimensional, an image of itself, which yeah, is an interesting process, how something transforms from a being to a medium. Yeah, then there's one more work I want to talk about because it was quite closely related to my work with models or playing models. So I was invited to the Gardena Biennial in Südtirol, and to make a monument for a town. And that valley, a lot of the forest is dying because of the bark beetle. So I decided to make a monument for the bark beetle, putting it as an equestrian monument, because that's normally a very well-known working format for monuments for questionable beings that we are afraid of, or we honor, or we dishonor. Quite a lot of those were taken down in the last years. So I thought it's a perfect format. These are, I think, also dolly generated. And so I was stuck in a traffic jam in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, for like 2 hours. And I just had a discussion with GPT where this thing came out in the end. And it was actually quite nice because I could really like bounce back and forth images and thoughts. And it was the first time I really can say like I had this idea together with these different models, like the language model that was helping me to say, okay, the bark beetle had its first appearance in Canada back then, and then it transformed to here, and then it became a problem here. And even though some of that information is not 100% true, it's enough for me to kind of have a brainstorming kind of situation. And then having these images, which really worked great. What didn't work that easy back then was transforming this into a 3D model. So we had to do that by hand. This is the monument, how it turned out. Yeah, so we had to kind of, now it works much better, transforming a two-dimensional image into a three-dimensional one. We had to do this by hand. Yeah, and the town, they like their monument. You can see behind it here, up here, you can see the forest that died already. And the bark beetle only attacks monocultural forests, which are normally human planted. So it's a message from the wild that tells us it doesn't work like that. So that's why I chose to give a monument to that message. Yeah, that's so far. Thank you.
I can lead off with a question, maybe. Here, I'm going to turn this on. It seems like there's, of course, the side that's interested in monuments right, which is a kind of very public expression, and then the gallery work, right, which is kind of more of a choice from someone to go into. And I think I was also really interested that some of the work seems like it's trying to find an answer to something, right, which I think the Tesseract is sort of, asking a question about how can we represent something that is impossible to visualize, whereas it seems like others are searching for an answer. Some of the other work is prompting us to think about something. Right? So there's like two sides. One is sort of providing an answer, providing a kind of representation of something. The other side, which is you're trying to prompt people to think about the boundaries of who we are.
Yeah, it is. I'm quite bored sometimes by putting works into exhibition spaces. So the work in public space is really important for me. But as I said in the beginning, I call myself an artist, so I get invited to do exhibitions in white cubes and sometimes in public space. But then this is also not reflecting everything that I'm interested in. So I also do work that I didn't show yet because they're not so easy to show, or they would make up a completely new chapter that wouldn't fit in this 1 hour. But of course, normally I'm more interested in disrupting, making it like creating problems. That's actually what I'm interested in. If the viewer looks at it and is confused and surprised and has to think about it the rest of the day or maybe even a year later, that's what I'm trying to create, a situation where you experience something that you did not think about before, or where it's not easy to put into a box and say, okay, this is that. So that's why I'm also, for example, not making so much like political art that is directly understandable with a political message, because that would be so easy to put into a box. Oh, this is like some activism that is trying to solve that problem with this way. You put it away. I'm more interested in like creating these problems, and these problems of perception I focus on in some works here, yeah.
You said with, I can't remember the name. Thank you, first of all. It's very, very cool projects. With the first project, I think, where the spinning table.
Egocentric system, yeah.
You were talking about this shift where you would stop spinning at some point. I'd be interested how long you stayed on this table. Like, so you were sleeping or working, and how long was this in total, and how long did it take, this shift?
Like I got this idea to do it from dance floors, where at some point figure out if I'm in the right state of mind, and I can just turn myself like this and get to that point just like that. And that was like this one magic moment where you shift, and I was just like in the middle of the dance floor, everything is turning around me. And I'm just standing there completely still, having a completely clear mind. And this just was such a strong feeling that I had, and suddenly being the center of the whole club. And also everything smears away, so you see all these faces passing by. And I said, okay, this was such a weird feeling that I had to scale that up and make it kind of exhibitable. And then doing this was the only idea that I had that kind of makes something like that exhibitable. In the end, I ended up spending a week on it and going through different stages of separation between me and the rest of the world. In the beginning, your mind doesn't want to be in there, so you constantly try to kind of focus on something that is off the bowl, and you're trying to flee from it. And in the end, it's the opposite. You really have your new home in there, and you're happy to not be bothered by anything that is around you. And I was happy I could read there, I could work, I could sleep. I could concentrate pretty well, even though 100 people are staring at me at the same time, which is also a bit reflecting on what does it mean to be an artist, what does it mean to be be a public person, what is the, also in society, what is the shift from being more community focused to now being more individually focused? Like, is that something that is happening actually anyway, that we are connected to everything through social media, but then still have our very egocentric home, which I was feeling. So people always ask me, what did you feel? But these things were actually the strongest. The relationship between me and the others. And that shifted every day. So even between the 6th and the 7th day, it was feeling different. I think astronauts have similar, at least that's what they say. I think it's different, but that's what they say, it's very strong. How they feel disconnected. Yeah, this narrative of the blue marble, seeing Earth from the outside the first time. Disconnecting from everything, seeing you as separate and everything else as one, takes a while to process. And the longer you process it, your mind comes up with different ideas of yourself.
Just one follow-up. How was getting off at the table again? How long did this take to? Was this 5 minutes and then back to normal?
Yeah, sometimes even less. It goes like, you can. It's surprisingly fast how you can how your brain gets used to new situations, but it's even faster going back, because your whole life long you were not turning. So this is a very dominant way of perceiving the world. So I had to go to pee once a day, and like the first 20 meters I was walking like this, and then it would straighten up, and it goes fast. But then some of it stays, of course. Like, I think I'm still, like when I'm in Basel now, because this was at Art Basel, and I've just been there, Art Basel is right now, so I perceive Basel differently now, because I experience it so strongly from this perspective, that every time I go to Basel, and the art world seems to me like this kind of spinning thing around me. It will never go away, I think. But I did also more experiments like this. Like once I was blind for a week, so I would put in black contact lenses, go to a city that I never saw before, spend some time there, work there, meet people, all of things that I didn't see before, trying to figure out how it feels to be in a non-visual world and see what my brain would come up with to replace those missing visual information. This is something I cannot really show, because how do you show something that is not visual? But it's an experiment for myself.
Thank you for this nice presentation. Was there also the idea to have others experience what you experience? Like put others in the chair of rotation? Has ever anybody asked you?
Yes. The first idea was not to do it myself. I just wanted to put it there, but then it was like, okay, only a very few number of people are able to go on it. So only a small percentage of the audience, which I thought is not so fair. So I thought I'd do the start and I do it for a while, and then people have to kind of just imagine it, which works surprisingly well. Like a lot of people spend a lot of time thinking about what I might think in there, which is an interesting transformation. And I force people to think, to imagine they're me, which worked much better than I thought. So this was actually a good setup. And now it was exhibited for 3 months, and there people would go on it themselves in a kind of didactical exhibition, which was for wasn't even public. It was for managers of a big company, so they would go on there to reflect on themselves, like upon themselves. That's like so, which I heard worked also surprisingly well. And so someone saw it there, so now it will get exhibited again in a different exhibition where people will be able to go on it. But it's a smaller exhibition, so more percentage of the audience can actually do it. And I'm also planning a very large-scale version of this, which becomes part of a landscape. So this is 5 meters, and I have a 15-meter version planned, which would be like a dent in a meadow. Like this, the parabolic shape is important because on the surface, the forces always go in a 90-degree angle to the ground. So you could place a glass of wine wherever, and it will always stay upright, and that makes it easier to move around on it. And so we would do the same thing with a piece of meadow, and also all the plants will grow like this because of the constant G-forces that mix, the combination of the Earth's gravity and the rotational forces that so you're slightly more heavy on the edge on the center, and all the plants would grow, and all the microbes and insects and everything will also have the same experience. And then there you can also go on with a whole class of people and camp on it and have that experience as a group experience, which is of course very different than if it's just you alone.
Can I maybe follow up on that? Because, one of the things perhaps just being trained as an architect, whenever I see something, I go, kind of what's the, first of all, of course, what is the message the creator is trying to convey, but then also, how do they do it, right? The sort of process behind it. And in most of these artworks, they're, or at least it's not obvious what the process is. And the methods actually you employ across all the different art, different pieces are all incredibly diverse, right? It's not one thing over and over, it's different, kind of techniques, methods, processes. And I'm just wondering, what is your kind of process of discovery in kind of researching these things and figuring out what's the right way to execute something?
Yeah, that's an important question. We are mainly in my studio engineers, architects, industrial designers, and normally I have this technical idea which seems impossible, and then we kind of find some solution together to make it possible. I'm very interested in questioning the medium itself. I'm not so interested to use a medium that is there to show something. I do that also, but I kind of always had a great joy in also coming up with a new medium. For example, these OSB plates, it's a new medium of making images. But in case of the parabolic bowl, for example, this was quite heavy, and new engineering. It's ultra high performance concrete with glass fiber reinforcement, and because I really wanted the bowl to look thin and be lightweight enough to be transported and so it can be put in most buildings so it doesn't overload the structure. And turned out that this is super complicated. And so we built a rotational casting apparatus for casting it, and with these cheese things where we built that for concrete, and got sponsored by some German high performance concrete company that were looking for good cases for their new product. So it's 2 centimeters concrete layer. So yeah, I'm an engineering nerd, so we spend a lot of time in that, and we also have other works that are 2 or 3 years of engineering in it, and that's why I said artists. We also just did an experimental engineering studio. Thank you very much.